All right, two more things to do with the snake and then we'll get them moving. So we've used this as a basis for understanding how the shader tree works. And we've seen some of the new tools like the texture replicator. There's a couple others in there I want to show you. And as we zoom in close to our snake, come on, there he goes. I pulled this back out a little bit from what we originally set because I wanted to show you that as this texture replicates down here, there's a few more things we can do, such as randomize the size. So if I just start clicking and dragging, you can see that again it's generating this off of the points of the model. The particle size is determining how big that is. Then the fall off gain and then the fall off bias determine how sharp that edge will be and how well it will blend with the other textures around it. So I did a job years ago for a pharmaceutical company. I had to do psoriasis. Something like this would have been great for it. I had to manually place all the textures on the skin. So this works really well. So you can randomize the size, and let's pull that back to about 50% or so. And then you can also rotate it just to give more randomization. And then you can even do a random rotation as well. So, and then I'll just increase the size again here just so they blend in. And as soon as they touch is about where I want it. Because I've noticed that once they start overlapping a little bit more, that's where things start getting a little bit slower. Alright, so there's a great looking texture from a bad texture. Now imagine if you took your time and actually had a really good, decent snake skin texture. That would work really well. So I'm going to save this. That is version 7. Alright, so I've taken off the texture on the snake body, just turned it off, turned the visibility off in the shader tree, just so we can work a little bit faster. Now, for the mouth, we can do an image map, and one thing that I've done in the past, which you can try, is let's say you need some kind of internal flesh. You need interior of a mouth, you need the interior of an organ. A great way to get that texture is to order a pizza, take off all the toppings and all the cheese, and take a photograph of that doughy, tomatoey bread. Believe it or not, it'll look a lot like open flesh and the inside of a mouth or a sore, and it works really, really well. But I'm not going to use that for the mouth. What I want to do, I could do it procedurally, and I'm going to show you one quickly, but I'm going to show you why I'm not going to do the final this way. I just want to show you how procedural can work in here. If we open the interior mouth, instead of diffuse amount for the material, let's right click on that and make it a diffuse color so we get this sort of nice kind of soft pink. Okay, and what I want to do is add some procedural textures, and there's one in here I really like that works well for a lot of things. So I'm going to go to Add Layer, down to Processing, down to Textures, and I'm going to choose Cellular. And what Cellular does, it creates all these great fun little cells. And if I go to Texture Locator, I can play with the size, and I'll bring all those sizes, all the size for all those really, really down. And this works great for just tiling a floor and, kind of doing mosaic type walls and things like that. And remember, you can change the effect of any of these just by right clicking on the effect and changing it like that in case it's a bump map. And if I come to the material and I make the bump stronger, like 100 millimeters, you can see we got that nice little crazy texture in there. That cellular texture can also play, you can play with the cell width and the transition so that it gets a little more veiny. You can then, my size is equal here, but I can just increase one value of it so I get this kind of cool veiny look too. If I right click on this and I create an instance, I can change that value maybe back to a diffuse color and then take this color and make it a little bit stronger red. Just not that I would make it that red, but I actually want the fill color to be red. And then what I'm going to do is take the alpha value for the cell color itself and make it 0. And what that will do is pull that value back. So the cells essentially aren't visible, only the fill color, the veins are. And then with the blending modes, just like you would in Photoshop, you can actually say add or subtract or make this difference or screen or overlay, any of those things you can do in Photoshop. So if you're not familiar with the Photoshop, go ahead and try it out and you do some of these on your images, and then you can do them here in 3D. So you can pull it back like that and get this nice kind of membrane-y look in there. Not that that's what the inside of a snake mouth looks like, but gave me an opportunity to show you that. Okay, I'm going to right click and delete these. But let's jump screens here. This is what I've found. I found all kinds of options for the interior of a snake mouth, and you can see it's just very veiny and some bloody and some white, and you know, that's kind of hard to image map, whether it's procedural or with an image. So how would you do it? Well, let's use the painting features. Over here in the top left is the Paint tab. Now, without getting too intricate into painting, it's really very simple. Essentially, you need to create an image. Now, we used an image map earlier when I was doing the snake, and I had mentioned that when you say add, let me go back to my shader tree. When you go back to and they say load image, I had mentioned you can create a new image. Well, this is what you're going to create a new image for. So when we loaded an image, we already had an image map. The painting tab here will let us build an image. So you're going to create a new image, and then you're going to paint on top of it. But you don't have to actually do that initially, especially when it's just one simple texture we're painting. So I'm going to zoom in here. In the Paint Tools tab of the Paint tab, I'm going to select Airbrush, and automatically a little tip is selected for me. Now down here there is Sculpting Tools, Painting Tools. These are all of our different brushes that we can use, and there's a number of different values that we can apply. So this very bottom one here, and these all come with Modo. I can select that, and you can see it changes the shape of the paintbrush, and it's just a preset basically. Let's start with simple brush just to begin with, and we're just going to right click, and this sets the size of the brush. If you look down here, bring down my tools, as I right click you can see that the size of the brush, smooth brush, that's it right there. As soon as I click, and let me come over here to images, those are the images loaded with this model right now. As soon as I click in here, there's a slight pause, and then you'll see a little blank image pop up. It says diff color, as in diffuse color. And look where it is. Oh, right in my interior mouth, because that was my material that was selected. So instead of me just saying image, new image, Modo did it for me. There are some advantages of doing a new image because you can set a resolution and you can layer them up. But for right now, that's going to work out just fine. Well, what then can I do? Well, let's say we need some white in these membranes we built back here. I'm just going to click and paint. And now I'm just painting color right on that image, giving our mouth just a little bit more realism, even though our snake is not really that realistic. And then I can change this color. I'm doing this all just on one image map. Get this nice bloody red here. And if I want, I can kind of streak down a little bit like that. You know, it's probably a little too much, but let me undo. I'm not trying to go for super realism, but that's just a little too much. Okay, and then we can just paint right in there. Now notice that I'm not affecting the teeth or the body or anything. That's because we're painting on a selected surface. And I'm just going to move back here. So I had a job years ago doing, I actually still do a lot of dental animations. And to paint the gums, I honestly don't know how I would have done it without the Modo painting tools. Okay, and I'm just blending in white and everything else. Now remember, this can still mix with your procedurals that are in there. And one of the most important things you need to do is also save this image. So you could save image as from the file menu. And you see by default it says diffuse color 1. I'm going to go into my 601 images and we'll just call this snake bad mouth, because it's a terrible painted mouth. But that now saves that image map. And if you double click on it in the shader tree, you'll actually see how that painting is applied. Now I don't like this pink under here, so I'm going to go back to my material. And let's take a look at the color and bring that down, just a nice deep red like that. And that way the white interior I've painted poorly in there actually shows up. But you can see that there's nice variations and works out pretty well. And then we can go back and add some procedural textures, and we can add in some bump maps and things like that just simply by going to special or textures, add the seller again, or even just add noise. And I know you guys know this, so we want to get to the good stuff. Let's make this guy move around, right? So let me just right click on this, surface shading, bump. And then let's make sure that the base material for that bump map, it's 100 millimeters. Let's make it 200 millimeters. Save. And then we got just some nice random textures in there with a little bit of bump. And then I've actually got some on the teeth as well, my blocky teeth that need to be a little bit sharper. But we've also not done anything with lighting yet either. And the reason I mention that now is because everything plays a part. Lighting, textures, environment, all of that plays a part. So let's open up the snake body, put the skin back on. And then this will pretty much wrap up all these textures for here. One thing I did want to talk about briefly, another new feature in here, and I'm going to use the teeth for that. Let me just do that real quick because I almost forgot. Give this texture a second. And the reason it slows is because it's drawing here. When you're working with this preview window, you can come in here and actually change some things. Right now it's set to shading. You can go to the options and turn off things like refractions, reflections, global illumination for using any volumetrics. Sometimes if you've got displacement maps on that are really huge, you can turn those off, or fur, just so you can see things a little bit faster if you're working with shading or something else. So, all right, so let's turn off the snake skin. That is really what's cranking up our time here. And let me just come down and show you one more little thing with the new shading tools. When we talk about the materials, and I'm going to go to the teeth here. For this base material, I've got a diffuse value of about 80%, which is the default. I've got some noise on there, which you've seen me do, and then I made that noise an instance and made it a bump map. And there's a little specularity on there. Well, the noise is driven by, or the bump is driven by that noise. That's why it's an instance. And you can actually see that there's these pink little dots here, purple, magenta. That means that color and everything else is driven by something else, which in this case is the parent, because that's just an instance. But if we go down to material and I play with these colors a bit, maybe make them a little dingier, kind of like this, and make them a little darker. I can play with the specularity for the amount of that shine, and then there is the roughness. Okay. But there's a new feature called diffuse roughness, and if I increase this, look what happens. The teeth just get kind of dark, right? It almost gives it sort of a flattened out kind of cartoon look. So if you're going to use any of the new shaders, some of the outlines, you can just create a nice flat look, because it takes that diffuse value and it just creates a roughness for it. The roughness down here, as you see it, is the gloss, right? And in order to do any kind of cell shading and cartoon and flat type art like that, you need to essentially flatten out the image and take away some of the 3D properties, which is specular and roughness. If you diffuse that, if you blend it and just dissipate it, like I've done here, things flatten out and they look a little bit more cartoony. So that's a great feature if you want to do something a little more illustrative. Whereas here now we see our 3D shading because it's not on. So just something to keep in mind if you're actually going for that kind of look. And I'm going to pull my roughness back a little bit like that. And then let's take this color and do something like that on it, which would be cool. So there's our teeth. I also mentioned earlier about the rounded edge shaders. Now we have different materials for all of our properties now, so they're not necessarily going to show up, but they will still blend depending on how things are connected. And if you don't lose your model like I just did, you can go ahead and put those on for the base of the teeth, for the eyes, things like that. But I'm going to save this, making sure that my snake body is back on. And we'll wrap up our shading for this guy. Okay, so again, just a basic overview of the shader tree in this section, finishing up the snake. And now what we're going to do is make this snake move with the new deformers.